My son's sledgehammer shattered my $150,000 workshop, while his wife filmed for internet fame, laughing as my life's work crumbled. I tried to stop him, but his fist met my face. They thought they'd won, flaunting their betrayal online. But what I did next didn't just ruin their lives, it carved their consequences into something colder and sharper. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The sound of splintering wood hit me before I even opened the garage door. My hand froze on the doorknob, the leather case holding the 1890s Stradivarius copy growing heavy in my other hand. Through the door, I heard Ashley's voice, shrill and excited. "Get that angle! Show them how much this stuff is worth." I pushed the door open, and the destruction that met my eyes made my knees buckle. 40 years of collecting, restoring, building, scattered across my workshop floor like garbage after a tornado. The Victorian-era piano hammer said I'd bought at an estate sale in Vermont, the one that cost me $3,000 and 6 months of searching, lay scattered across the concrete like broken bones. Each ivory handle was snapped, the brass fittings bent beyond recognition. Brian stood in the center of the chaos, sledgehammer raised above his head, his face twisted in a grin that looked nothing like the boy I'd raised. Behind him, Ashley held her phone up, live streaming everything. The smell of broken lacquer bottles burned my nostrils. French polish from the 1920s, impossible to replace, pooled under the workbench where my grandfather's hand-forged chisels lay twisted and bent. "Brian, stop!" My voice came out strangled. "The Morrison estate. I have 3 violins to restore by next week. Those are client instruments." He turned to me, and the theatrical way he positioned himself for Ashley's camera made my stomach turn. Look who finally showed up, the great George Harrison, master craftsman. He brought the hammer down on my dust collection system, the custom unit I'd built myself over 3 months. The metal crumpled like paper. "Tell your viewers, Ashley. Tell them how Daddy here hoards treasures while his son drowns in student loans." Ashley swung the phone toward me, her perfectly manicured nails gleaming. "Guys, you won't believe this boomer's reaction. He cares more about some old tools than his own son's struggles." I stepped forward, glass crunching under my feet, the remnants of my bottle collection of vintage varnishes. Each step felt like walking through my own memories being ground to powder. "Brian, please. This isn't just stuff. These are commitments to clients. People trust me with their family heirlooms." "Family?" Brian laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the walls. "Like you trusted me? Like you helped me when I needed it?" He swung again, this time at the restoration bench my father had built in 1962. The oak top, worn smooth by 3 generations of hands, split down the middle. I lunged for the sledgehammer, trying to grab it from his hands. We struggled, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Genuine hatred. His fist came up fast, connecting with my jaw with a crack that sent white light across my vision. I fell backward, the Stradivarius copy flying from my hand. The case popped open as it hit the ground, the instrument skittering across the debris. Sharp metal bit into my palm as I tried to catch myself. Glass from the varnish bottles sliced through my shirt, embedding in my back. The world went gray at the edges, but I could still hear Ashley's delighted voice. "That's content gold. We'll title it Karma Comes for Greedy Boomer. This is gonna go so viral." My vision cleared slowly, everything tilted and wrong, blood dripped from my split lip onto the concrete. Brian had gone back to his destruction, bringing the hammer down on my humidity chamber. $15,000 and 2 years of calibration destroyed in seconds. Ashley kept filming, occasionally directing him. "Get that expensive lathe in the shot. Show them how rich Daddy really is." Pain radiated from my jaw, my back, my bleeding hand, but all I could focus on was the systematic destruction of 4 decades of my life. The bow re-herring jig from the 1890s, $8,000 and absolutely irreplaceable, shattered under Brian's heel. The complete set of hide glue I'd inherited from my mentor, kept perfect since the 1950s, scattered and crushed. Every piece had a story. The Japanese saws I'd bought from a master in Kyoto, who'd spent an hour teaching me the proper grip. The French polishing kit from a widow in Bordeaux, who'd cried as she sold her husband's tools. All of it becoming splinters and fragments under my son's rage. I tried to stand, but my body wouldn't cooperate. Through the haze of pain, I watched Brian approach the bench where my father taught me to feel wood grain with my fingertips. The bench where I'd shown Brian how to sand with the grain when he was 7, his small hands guided by mine. The sledgehammer rose above his head, and the bench that had stood for 60 years began splitting under Brian's sledgehammer when Walter's voice cut through the chaos. "George! Jesus, what happened here?" My neighbor stood in the doorway, his retired cop instincts kicking in immediately. He took in the scene, me on the floor bleeding, Brian with the sledgehammer, Ashley still filming, and moved with surprising speed for a 70-year-old. "Put the hammer down, son, now." Brian actually laughed. "Another boomer to the rescue. Ashley, you getting this?" "Every second, babe." She pivoted to catch Walter in frame. "Look, viewers, they're ganging up now." Walter knelt beside me, his fingers checking my pulse, examining my injuries with practiced efficiency. "We need an ambulance. This is assault, destruction of property. Let them go, Walter." My voice came out thick, blood from my split lip making it hard to talk. "Let them think they've won." Brian dropped the sledgehammer with a clang. "We're done here anyway. Got everything we needed." He stepped over debris, crushing a violin bridge under his boot, one I'd carved by hand last month. "Come on, Ash. Let's let the old men cry over their broken toys." Ashley lowered her phone, checking the viewer count. 50,000 already. Babe, we're trending." They left through the same door they'd forced open, their laughter echoing in the destroyed space. Walter pulled out his phone, already dialing 911. I grabbed his wrist with my good hand. "I said let them go. George, your hand needs stitches. You might have a concussion. And this..." He gestured at the destruction. "This is felony-level damage." The ambulance ride blurred past. I spent it mentally cataloging what I'd seen destroyed, adding numbers in my head while the EMT asked me questions about the date and my name. At the ER, they cleaned glass from my back, put 7 stitches in my palm, ran tests for the concussion. I told them I'd fallen while working, knocked some things over. The young doctor didn't believe me, but didn't push. Officer Martinez arrived while they were wrapping my ribs, bruised, not broken. "Mr. Harrison, your neighbor called about an assault. I need to take a statement." "Family dispute," I said carefully. "I'll handle it privately." Walter, who'd followed the ambulance, threw his hands up. "George, they assaulted you. This is felony destruction. Your son is still my son." I met his eyes. "I know what I'm doing, Walter." Martinez left his card, told me I had 30 days to file charges if I changed my mind. Walter drove me home as the sun came up on January 16th, lecturing the whole way about pressing charges, about not letting Brian get away with this. I let him talk, my mind already 3 steps ahead. The workshop looked worse in the morning light. Systematic documentation. That's what I needed. Despite the throbbing in my hand and the pounding in my head, I started photographing everything. Wide shots, close-ups, multiple angles. That's when I spotted it. The vintage clock on the high shelf, the one Brian hadn't noticed. The one with the hidden camera I'd installed after tools started going missing last year. I pulled the memory card with shaking fingers, loaded it on my laptop. There they were, crystal clear. Brian and Ashley planning it out. Her directing him on what to destroy first for maximum impact. Her saying, "Make sure you get the expensive stuff. The viewers love seeing rich people's things get wrecked." Ashley's video was already at 50,000 views. The title made my jaw clench, entitled, "Boomer Gets What He Deserves." Monetization was enabled. They were making money off destroying my life. Comments poured in, most supporting them, calling me names, celebrating my pain. But I saved it all. Evidence. The credit card statements took longer to find. Brian still had access to one of my accounts. My fault for trusting him. $45,000 in charges over the past 3 months. Vegas trips, designer clothes for Ashley, restaurant bills that could feed a family for a month, all while claiming he couldn't afford rent. I started the inventory at my damaged desk, typing one-handed. The 1890s Bo Herring jig, $8,000, irreplaceable. The complete set of hide glue from Leonard, my mentor, $2,000, but the sentimental value immeasurable. Hand-forged Japanese saws from Master Yamamoto, $12,000. The custom humidity chamber, $15,000, destroyed beyond any repair. Line by line, photo by photo, I documented everything. The insurance company would find a way out. They always did with family member exclusions. But I needed the record. for what came next. $150,000. That was the conservative estimate, not counting the instruments I'd been restoring for clients, not counting 60 years of family history ground to dust. My father's bench alone. How do you put a price on the place where 3 generations learned their craft? I found the photo under debris near the door, our family portrait from Brian's college graduation. Someone, Ashley probably, had drawn devil horns on me, wrote greedy across my face. Brian was smiling in the photo, his arm around my shoulders. I'd paid for that degree, every penny. The transformation happened while I held that defaced photo. Not rage. Rage was hot and quick and faded. This was different, cold, precise, permanent. I called Margaret Stone, the attorney who'd handled my business and corporations. I need complete financial and legal separation from my son. George, it's 7 a.m. Is everything all right? I need every access revoked, every connection severed. Can you see me tomorrow? I have 9 a.m. open. I'll be there. I hung up and opened a new spreadsheet on my laptop. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard for just a moment before typing. Recovery protocol. The columns formed quickly. Asset protection came first. Legal action second. The third made my fingers pause over the keyboard. Consequences. My finger hovered, then typed it with deliberate force. Margaret Stone's office occupied the 20th floor of the Pemberton building, all mahogany and leather that whispered old Portland money. Oregon property law books lined her shelves like soldiers. I sat across from her desk, my bandaged hand resting on the USB drive that contained everything. She'd been my attorney for 15 years, handled all my business and corporations, but she'd never seen me like this. Stitches still fresh on my palm, moving stiffly from the bruised ribs. "Show me," she said simply. The video played on her laptop. Brian's gleeful destruction, Ashley's commentary, the assault. Margaret's professional mask slipped for just a second when the sledgehammer connected with my jaw. Her fingers drummed once on the desk, then stopped. Property damage alone exceeds $150,000. She pulled up Oregon statutes on her second monitor. The assault is clear battery, but George, this signature on the lease agreement. She held up a paper from the stack I'd brought. "This isn't yours." My good hand clenched. "Brian's been signing my name for years. I just discovered how deep it goes." Her pen clicked rhythmically against her legal pad. "Identity theft changes everything. This is federal." She studied the forged signatures, comparing them to the authentic ones. "He's gotten sophisticated. See the practice flow? This was an impulse." "Make it slow," I said, meeting her eyes. "Make them feel it gradually." She nodded, understanding perfectly. "Oregon requires 30 days for eviction notices. We'll serve them today. The civil suit for property damage and emotional distress will take months. Give them time to spiral while the criminal investigation builds." Her fingers flew across the keyboard. "I'll need you at First National after this. Document everything financial." The drive from her office to the bank took me past Brian's usual Starbucks. His car sat in the lot, Ashley's pink Mini beside it. I didn't stop, didn't even slow down. Let them enjoy their morning lattes while they still had credit. First National Bank of Portland had been my bank for 20 years. Rebecca Chen, the branch manager, stood up when she saw me limping in. "George, I heard about... Are you all right? I need to review all my accounts, everything." She led me to her office, pulled up my records. Her expression changed as she scrolled. "Mr. Harrison, there's unusual activity. Did you authorize a $5,000 cash advance yesterday?" My laugh came out bitter. "Cancel everything. Every card, every access point." "Your son was here an hour ago," Rebecca lowered her voice. "He seemed agitated when his card was declined at the ATM." The credit report she pulled revealed 3 cards I'd never opened, $30,000 in debt I'd never accumulated, all with Brian added as an authorized user last month. Each form required signatures, and my injured hand cramped around the pen. Other customers glanced over as I methodically closed account after account, signed form after form. 2 hours of systematic financial amputation. 2 days passed in preparation. New locks on every door, security cameras with motion sensors, legal documents filed and served. The eviction notice would have reached them yesterday. Tonight, January 19th, they'd come. I knew my son. 8 o'clock. I sat in my dark living room, new recorder in my pocket, waiting. The motion sensors would trigger when they entered the yard. Sure enough, Ashley's voice carried through the night air first. Document everything for the lawsuit. Show them how he's locking out his own son. The back door rattled. Brian had brought his lockpicks, not knowing I'd installed a different mechanism entirely. The motion sensors flooded the backyard with light, catching them perfectly in frame for my new cameras. "Open up, old man!" Brian's foot connected with the door. "You can't lock me out of my inheritance." I stood slowly, walked to the door, but didn't open it. "It's not yours yet. I'm still breathing." "We'll destroy you online," Ashley shrieked. "Elder abuse, financial manipulation. My followers will—" "Please do," I interrupted calmly. "My lawyer loves evidence." Through the door's window, I watched Brian's face contort. "I know where your clients live, the Morrison family, the Pembertons. One word from me about your declining mental state. Like you knew how to forge my signature? That's 5 to 10 years federal time, Brian." Silence. Then Ashley's nervous laugh. "He's bluffing, babe. He won't send his own son to prison." They left, but not before Brian kicked over my garbage cans, scattered trash across the driveway. I watched from the window, documenting everything. Let them think this was about anger. They'd learn it was about consequences. The next afternoon, Thomas Fitzgerald from Hartford Insurance arrived. 20-year veteran, he'd seen everything, or thought he had. His expression when he entered my destroyed workshop said otherwise. "Mr. Harrison, I've investigated fraud, arson, even vandalism, but this—" he gestured at the devastation. "This is personal." I walked him through each destroyed item, provided receipts, provenance, documentation. The bone fragments from the Victorian piano hammers made him whistle low. The twisted remains of my grandfather's chisels brought out his camera. Every piece had restoration history, I explained, lifting the shattered frame of my first project with my father. This cabinet door, 1902, was my grandfather's first restoration. He carved his initials. Thomas lifted the broken frame of my grandfather's first restoration project, a 1902 cabinet door, and I saw his expression change when he noticed the carved initials JH 1902 were still visible through the destruction. "This had sentimental value," Thomas said, making notes. "That changes the claim parameters. Irreplaceable items carry different weight." Dr. Patricia Wong's handwriting analysis lab occupied a narrow office squeezed between a tax attorney and a bail bondsman. Not glamorous, but Patricia was the best forensic document examiner in Oregon. January 21st, my stitches freshly removed but the scars still angry red. I spread 15 documents across her examination table. 3 years of forgeries, I told her. I brought everything I could find. She adjusted her microscopic scanner, began with the oldest documents. Under UV light, the forgeries glowed differently than my authentic signatures. Brian's pen pressure created telltale patterns. He pressed harder on the downstrokes, lighter on the curves where I maintained consistent pressure. "This isn't impulse." Patricia pulled out practice sheets Walter had found in Brian's trash, delivered them yesterday. "See these repetitions? He trained himself to copy your signature. The progression shows dedication." Each document went under her instruments. Lease agreements, credit applications, wire transfers. The total reached $45,000 in fraudulent transactions. Patricia's formal report would be ready in 3 days, suitable for criminal prosecution. "Mr. Harrison," she said carefully, "your son didn't just steal from you, he studied you. This level of premeditation suggests he's been planning this for years." 4 days later, I stood in my destroyed workshop when Samuel Kelly's Bentley pulled into my driveway. Unannounced, unexpected. Samuel owned Kelly Antique Gallery, the premier restoration destination on the West Coast. We'd done business for 30 years. "George," he surveyed the wreckage, his face unreadable. "I heard rumors, had to see for myself." He walked through the debris, occasionally picking up a destroyed tool, examining it like an archaeologist. The remains of my humidity chamber made him shake his head. At the shattered restoration bench, he stopped. "You restored my grandmother's escritoire when no one else would touch it," he said quietly. "That was 1994. You spent 6 months on marquetry that other restorers said was impossible. Samuel, I'm offering you more than a job." He turned to face me. $120,000 salary plus commission. You'd head my new restoration department. My throat tightened. Samuel, that's generous, but I'm offering you a weapon. A weapon? Success. His eyes were hard. Nothing burns failed children more than watching their parents thrive without them. The digital war had escalated beyond my participation. Brian and Ashley created Mujri's elder abuse George, posting edited videos that made me look aggressive, unhinged. Ashley's lifestyle blog pivoted entirely to surviving toxic in-laws. Their follower count climbed to 75,000. I didn't engage, didn't need to. Walter, without my knowledge, had posted the full security footage on Reddit. The internet did what it does: investigated, analyzed, took sides. Comment sections filled with frame-by-frame breakdowns of the destruction. Wait, he destroyed 150K of his dad's property? Became the most upvoted comment. Ashley's livestream on February 2nd got interrupted when the process server arrived with eviction papers. She'd forgotten she was still broadcasting. Brian's meltdown, his screaming about inheritance, his admission that he deserved my tools, all captured for her audience. Local news picked up the story. I provided the full security footage to investigative reporter Jennifer Martinez. The segment aired during prime time. Brian and Ashley's narrative crumbled in real time. Portland Police Bureau's Financial Crimes Unit operated from a gray building that seemed designed to intimidate. Detective Miranda Santos had been investigating my case for 2 weeks. February 5th, 3 in the afternoon, she laid out her findings. 3 banks confirmed fraudulent applications. Your son's fingerprints are on every document. Text records between him and his wife show conspiracy. She arranged photos across her desk. Brian at ATMs, signatures under analysis, timeline charts. We have enough for arrest warrants. The federal involvement meant serious charges: wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. Each carried years of potential prison time. Santos slid the warrant paperwork across her desk. Mr. Harrison, I need you to understand. Once you sign these, there's no going back. Your son will be arrested, processed, held until bail hearing. I looked at the detective's warrant paperwork, pen in my hand, and thought about Brian at 5 years old, helping me sand his first piece of wood, his tiny fingers following the grain, so careful, so eager to please. The pen touched paper as the pen moved across the signature line, with the same precision I once used to restore a 1780s harpsichord. Detective Santos nodded, folding the warrant. We'll execute these tomorrow morning. 9 days later, February 15th, I sat in my car across from Brian's rental house, Samuel Kelly beside me. Portland's perpetual February drizzle streaked the windshield. The small craftsman house looked defeated. Overgrown lawn, Amazon boxes moldering on the porch, trash bins overflowing. There, Samuel pointed. Sheriff Deputy Coleman's cruiser pulled up, followed by 2 more units. Ashley appeared at the window instantly, phone already recording. Police harassment. We're being persecuted. Her voice carried across the wet street. Brian emerged behind her, and I noticed he wore my vintage Omega, another theft I'd discovered last week. Deputy Coleman approached with measured authority, his boots splashing through puddles. Mr. Harrison, we're executing an eviction order. You have 2 hours to collect your belongings. Through the window, I watched Brian dragging furniture to block the door. Pointless theatrics. The neighbors gathered on porches, some recording with their phones. Portland loved its neighborhood drama. This is illegal, Brian's voice cracked through the morning air. My father orchestrated this. Ashley had positioned herself for maximum dramatic effect, ring light glowing despite the daylight. Look at this abuse. They're throwing us out in the rain. Donate to our legal fund. Samuel chuckled beside me. Your son seems to have inherited your stubbornness, if nothing else. The deputies made quick work of the barricade. Soon, furniture appeared on the wet lawn. Brian's gaming setup, worth $3,000, collecting rain in its RGB components. Ashley's camera equipment, so precisely arranged inside, now scattered across dead grass. She stopped filming when her ring light toppled into a puddle. Marcus Chen, the private investigator I'd hired 3 weeks ago, chose that moment perfectly. He approached during the chaos, manila envelope in hand. I'd told him to make sure Ashley saw Brian receive it. Brian Harrison? Marcus maintained professional calm, despite the scene. Brian, arms full of soggy clothes, looked confused. What? Who are you? Delivery for you, sir. Marcus handed over the envelope and walked away. Ashley swung her camera toward Brian. What's that, babe? Is it from the lawyer? Brian tore it open. The photos spilled out, glossy, undeniable. The first showed Ashley entering the Hilton downtown with Derek Morrison. The second, my credit card statement with the hotel charge highlighted. The third stopped Brian cold. Derek wearing Brian's graduation Rolex, the one I'd given him 5 years ago, the one he claimed was stolen. The photos fluttered to the wet ground. Brian scrambled to grab them, mud smearing the images. His face transformed as each image registered. Ashley's live stream caught every second of his disintegration. 3 months? His voice broke like a teenager's. You've been with Derek 3 months? Ashley's composed mask cracked. Baby, those photos are fake, deep fakes. Someone's trying to... That's my Rolex! Brian held up the photo, rain streaming down his face. The one Dad gave me. You said it was stolen. Turn off the stream. Ashley lunged for her phone. Brian, turn it off. No. He pushed her away. Let them see who you really are. The viewer count climbed. 10,000, 15,000, 20. Comments flooded in faster than anyone could read. Ashley's carefully curated image shattered in real time. I drove away as they screamed at each other on the lawn, their belongings soaking in the Portland rain. Samuel understood my silence. Some victories didn't require words. Over the next 3 days, I monitored the digital aftermath from my home office. Ashley's follower count plummeted from 75,000 to 31,000 in 48 hours. Ashley, the cheat trended locally. Brian posted a confession video, drunk and rambling, admitting to destroying my workshop, but blaming Ashley for manipulating him. The internet did what it does best, investigated everything. Reddit detectives found more evidence of Derek and Ashley's affair. Someone discovered Derek's wife didn't know. The story exploded beyond Portland, beyond what either Brian or Ashley could control. Walter helped me compile evidence for YouTube. Their channel lost monetization for fraud. 3 years of building their online presence, destroyed in 72 hours. February 20th, 7 in the evening. I returned from the gallery to find Brian's beaten Honda Civic in my driveway. He sat on my porch steps, unshaven, wearing the same clothes I'd seen in his last video. The security lights illuminated hollow eyes and trembling hands. She took everything, he said without preamble. Derek cleared out our account, the savings, the emergency fund, gone. I stood on the walkway, keeping distance between us. The boy who'd once helped me restore a 1925 Steinway looked like a stranger. I need somewhere to stay, just the garage. I'll sleep in the workshop, what's left of it. The workshop you destroyed? I kept my voice level. The one with 150,000 in damages? Dad, please. I know I messed up. Ashley manipulated me, convinced me you were the enemy. But I'm your son. I pulled the invoice from my jacket. 150,000 printed in bold at the bottom. Brian's face went pale as he saw the itemized list. 1890s French polishing kit, $2,000. Victorian piano restoration tools, $8,000. Grandfather's chisels, priceless, valued at $500 each. His hands trembled as he read. Every item, I said quietly. Every tool you destroyed. 3 appraisers confirmed these values. The emotional damage isn't even calculated here. Brian's fingers traced down the list, stopping at random entries. Dad, I don't have this kind of money. You know I don't. Then you'll pay it over time. 18% annual interest. The court will garnish your wages when you find work. I pulled out the additional papers Margaret had prepared. There's also the matter of 15,000 in legal fees. You're really going to destroy your own son? His voice cracked with disbelief. I'm applying the same consequences to you that I would to any stranger who did this. I handed him Margaret's business card. She's serving you with the civil suit papers. The criminal charges are separate. Brian stood slowly, the invoice crumpling in his fist. Derek took everything, the account, the furniture. He even took the Rolex you gave me. The one you let Ashley give him? I remained unmoved. Choices have consequences, Brian. A car pulled up, Margaret's BMW. She emerged with another envelope, serving Brian on my porch with witnesses present. He accepted it numbly, his world collapsing in legal documents. 5 days later, February 25th, I sat in Richmond Fidelity's conference room. Kevin Park, their senior adjuster, faced me across polished mahogany. Their lawyer, Catherine Walsh, flanked him. Margaret sat beside me, our evidence boxes stacked like ammunition. "Mr. Harrison," Park began, "while we sympathize with your situation, the domestic dispute exclusion—" "This wasn't a domestic dispute," Margaret interrupted. "This was breaking and entering, assault, and deliberate vandalism. We have video evidence." Walsh leaned forward. The perpetrator was his son, who had historical access to the property. Historical access that was revoked. The locks were changed. He broke in. Margaret opened her laptop, pulled up Brian's confession video. "Here's your insured son admitting to criminal destruction." Park shifted uncomfortably. "We're prepared to offer 30% as a goodwill gesture." 30%? I kept my voice steady. "For $150,000 in documented losses?" "It's generous, considering the family connection," Walsh said. Margaret smiled, the kind that preceded legal devastation. "Would you like me to contact the state insurance commissioner about bad faith denial? Or should we discuss the news coverage that will follow when Portland learns you're denying a 60-year-old assault victim's legitimate claim?" By the meeting's end, they'd agreed to 70%. Not perfect, but combined with Samuel's salary, enough to rebuild. March 5th, 11 at night, my phone buzzed with an email from Ashley. The subject line, "We need to talk." The attached video showed edited footage, me looking aggressive, taken out of context from the security cameras. Her message was simple: transfer $50,000 to this account, or this goes viral. You have 48 hours. I forwarded it to Detective Santos immediately, then called Margaret. Within an hour, we had a plan. The police would mark bills, I had arranged the meeting, Ashley would hang herself with her own greed. She agreed to meet in Lloyd Center's parking garage. March 7th, 2 in the afternoon. I arrived wired, police in unmarked cars watching. Ashley showed up in Derek's Mercedes. Apparently, she'd moved on to her next target. "You destroyed my life," she said, accepting the envelope of marked bills. "This is just compensation." "You destroyed your own life," I replied calmly, "and now you've added extortion to your charges." The police moved in before she reached the car. Her scream echoed through the garage as they cuffed her. Derek, waiting in the Mercedes, drove off without looking back. March 10th, 4 o'clock. Kelly Antique Gallery's workshop hummed with activity. The insurance check had arrived, $147,500. My first restoration, a 1764 English harpsichord, had earned a $10,000 bonus. Samuel planned a grand reopening to showcase the restoration department. The new workshop doubled my old space. Climate control, security systems, proper ventilation. A young apprentice named Marcus, a scholarship kid from Jefferson High, worked beside me, learning the same techniques my father had taught me. Brian appeared in the doorway during setup, customers milling about the gallery. He couldn't make a scene here, and we both knew it. He watched me teaching Marcus the French polishing technique, the same circular motions I'd tried teaching him 20 years ago. "You replaced me," he said quietly. "You replaced yourself," I corrected, not looking up from the demonstration. "Marcus wants to learn. You wanted to destroy." Brian stood in the doorway, watching me teach the apprentice the same technique I'd tried teaching him 20 years ago. His mouth opened to speak, but then he saw the same French polishing technique manual I'd tried to give him for his 16th birthday, now in the eager hands of my apprentice. His jaw worked silently. Then he turned and left without a word. 4 days later, March 15th, rain streaked the courthouse windows as I sat in the front row of Judge Patricia Yamamoto's courtroom. Margaret arranged evidence folders beside me, while Brian shuffled in, wearing an ill-fitting Goodwill suit, his public defender whispering urgently in his ear. The gallery filled with reporters who'd followed the viral video story. Walter settled behind me, his hand occasionally squeezing my shoulder. Ashley's absence felt deliberate, her own hearing scheduled for next week. The court reporter's fingers positioned over her keys as Judge Yamamoto reviewed the charges. "Mr. Harrison," she addressed Brian, her voice carrying the weight of 30 years on the bench. "You're charged with identity theft, fraud, and destruction of property exceeding $100,000. These charges carry a maximum sentence of 5 years imprisonment." Brian's voice cracked. Yes, Your Honor. How do you plead to count one, identity theft? He looked at me for the first time since entering. 3 seconds of eye contact that felt like 30 years collapsing into dust. Guilty. The prosecutor outlined the evidence. Forged signatures spanning 3 years, $45,000 in theft, Brian's own video confession. She recommended 3 years probation and $50,000 in restitution, citing his lack of prior record. Judge Yamamoto's pen tapped against her desk. Counselor, this wasn't impulse. This was systematic exploitation of a parent's trust. The defendant didn't just steal money. He destroyed decades of craftsmanship out of spite. Brian's lawyer attempted damage control, but the judge had seen the footage, read the testimonies. She sentenced him to 3 years probation, $100,000 in restitution at 18% interest, and 300 hours of community service. The felony conviction would follow him forever. In the courthouse hallway afterward, Brian cornered me near the elevators. Reporters hovered with phones ready. Margaret stepped protectively forward, but I waved her back. You destroyed my life over things. Brian's voice shook with rage. Over wood and tools. You destroyed 40 years of my life's work in 40 minutes. I'm your son. Biology doesn't erase accountability. He stepped closer, fists clenched. Walter moved between us immediately, his retired cop instincts still sharp. Walk away, son. You've done enough damage. Brian's face crumpled as the reality hit. The felony meant no professional licenses, no corporate jobs, no apartments that ran background checks. He'd carved his own future into splinters as thoroughly as he'd destroyed my workshop. This isn't over, he said, backing toward the stairwell. Yes, I replied quietly. It is. A week later, Richmond Fidelity Insurance called me back to their headquarters. This time, the conference room held senior executives and a check for $150,000, plus $15,000 for legal fees. They'd fired the original adjuster who'd tried to deny my claim. We apologize for the initial handling, the vice president said, sliding the check across the mahogany table. We've revised our domestic dispute policies based on your case. I refused their non-disclosure agreement, demanded a written apology instead. The media coverage had forced their hand. Nobody wanted to be the company denying an elderly assault victim's legitimate claim. Margaret smiled as she reviewed the settlement. Complete victory. The attention brought unexpected benefits to Samuel's gallery. 3 major collectors approached with restoration contracts after seeing the news coverage. The workshop became a destination for serious craftsmen. Samuel announced expansion plans, hiring 2 more apprentices under my supervision. April 1st arrived with unusual sunshine. The county tax auction notice in the newspaper caught my eye. Brian and Ashley's rental house, foreclosed after months of non-payment. Margaret suggested I attend through an LLC she'd created. Harrison Holdings, anonymous but legal. The auction drew only 3 bidders. The property needed work, but the bones were solid, like a neglected violin awaiting restoration. Margaret's paralegal bid on my behalf. Final price, $47,000. Brian had no idea who'd bought his former home. I hired a property management company to handle everything. Market rent, $2,200 monthly. When Brian's rental application arrived, current address listed as his Honda Civic, the property manager called immediately. Mr. Harrison, your son's rental application came in. He listed his current address as his Honda Civic. When we ran the ownership records, his face went white as paper. He just stood there staring at the document showing Harrison Holdings LLC as the owner. Then he asked if you knew he was applying. Tell him the owner requires first month, last month, and security deposit, I instructed. No exceptions. April 10th, Kelly Antique Gallery's expansion unveiled to Portland's collector elite. Champagne flowed while my 3 apprentices demonstrated restoration techniques behind the workshop's new glass walls. $2 million in contracts already secured, with a documentary filmmaker requesting interviews about preserving craftsmanship traditions. Through the celebration, I spotted Brian's battered Civic parked across the street. He sat behind the wheel, watching his father receive the recognition he'd tried to destroy. The mayor's representative presented a proclamation honoring my contribution to Portland's cultural heritage. Brian drove away before the speeches ended. Ashley remained in county jail, contempt charges added after she'd threatened the judge. Her mother stopped calling when she learned there was no money left. At 3 in the morning on April 20th, Brian unloaded trucks at a warehouse in the industrial district. $15 hourly under someone else's social security number, the only work available to felons without paperwork questions. He'd lost 30 pounds, his clothes hanging loose from Salvation Army racks. The supervisor treated him like disposable labor, which he was. Between shifts, he slept in the break room. Vending machine dinners replaced the restaurant meals Ashley had charged to my cards. His phone sat disconnected in his car's glove compartment, a dead black mirror reflecting nothing. A letter from Ashley arrived at the warehouse, forwarded from their old address. She needed money for commissary, for a lawyer, for hope. Brian burned it in a trash barrel during his break, watching their marriage certificate dissolve into ash and smoke. 8 days later, April 28th, I worked late finishing a 1798 pianoforte restoration. The gallery stood empty except for security lights. 9 o'clock, the parking garage echoed with my footsteps. A broken streetlight left deep shadows between concrete pillars. They emerged fast, 2 men, one with a knife catching ambient light. "Wallet and keys, old man." My hand found the restoration knife in my jacket, muscle memory from a youth in rougher neighborhoods. I pushed the first attacker into the wall, but the second moved quicker, blade arcing toward my ribs. Brian materialized from nowhere, tackling the knife wielder with desperate fury. They rolled across oil-stained concrete. The blade meant for me opened a 3-inch gash across Brian's ribs instead. Blood spread quickly through his thin shirt. The attackers fled. Brian collapsed against a pillar, pressing his hand to the wound. Red seeped between his fingers. "Don't move." I dropped beside him, applying direct pressure with my jacket. My other hand dialed 911, voice steady despite the blood warming my palms. "Stay awake, Brian. Look at me." "Couldn't let them hurt you," he whispered, eyes unfocused. "Whatever I am, you're still my father." The ambulance arrived in minutes that felt like hours. Paramedics stabilized him, while I insisted on riding along. First time I'd touched my son in months was holding his blood inside his body. Portland General Hospital's fluorescent lights felt harsh after midnight. Brian required surgery. The knife had grazed his liver. No insurance meant I signed financial responsibility forms without hesitation. The police took statements, confirming clear self-defense. Brian woke near dawn, morphine making him honest. "Jealous of that workshop since I was 7. You loved those tools more than me. I loved teaching you to use them. You're the one who stopped trying." Ashley saw the anger, fed it, shaped it. He stared at the ceiling tiles. "But I chose to swing that sledgehammer. I chose every signature I forged." Memories flooded back. Brian at 7, sanding his first piece of wood, tongue poking out in concentration. The moment at 13 when he declared my work boring, old-fashioned, irrelevant. His mother's voice, my late wife Sally, whispering about forgiveness and second chances. "I'm not asking for anything," Brian continued. "I know what I destroyed can't be rebuilt." The employment application lay in my briefcase. Warehouse work at the gallery, minimum wage, no access to restoration areas. Samuel had questioned my sanity when I'd requested it. Proving ground, not forgiveness. Opportunity, not absolution. I looked at my son, smaller now in the hospital bed, and pulled the employment application from my briefcase. My pen hovered over the signature line, as and signed my name with deliberate strokes. Not forgiveness, terms and conditions. "You start Monday," I told him. "Warehouse inventory, minimum wage, no access to restoration areas." 3 days later, May 5th, Margaret Stone's office felt colder than usual, despite the spring warmth outside. Brian sat across from us in borrowed clothes, his healing wound making him shift carefully in the leather chair. The employment contract spread between us contained clauses no normal employee would sign. "$200,000 total debt," Margaret read aloud. "60% wage garnishment after taxes. 5-year minimum repayment schedule." She slid the pages toward Brian. "Initial each clause, sign at the bottom." The contract detailed everything. Instant termination for any tardiness, insubordination, or legal violation. No access to workshop, tools, or clients. Prohibited from mentioning our family relationship to anyone at the gallery. Mandatory testing for substances, though Brian had never used. The pen trembled in his hand from the healing wound as he initialed each humiliation. "Thank you," he said quietly after signing. Silence. Margaret's secretary witnessed the signatures. No handshake crossed the table. After Brian left, Margaret pulled me aside in the hallway. "George, if he claims discrimination based on family status, this could backfire legally. You need meticulous documentation of everything. Every minute will be recorded," I assured her. "This isn't personal anymore. It's business." 10 days later, Portland Community College's auditorium filled with students and media for the Sally Harrison Memorial Fund announcement. $100,000 endowed to support foster youth learning restoration crafts. The first recipient, Marcus Chen, 19, aged out of foster care, dreaming of preserving family histories through furniture, stood beside me at the podium. Brian sat in the back row. I knew without looking, felt his presence like a stone in my shoe. Marcus spoke about second chances, about finding purpose in preserving what others had built. The irony tasted bitter as copper. When the ceremony ended, Brian tried approaching through the crowd. Walter intercepted him smoothly, a quiet word sending him away. I never acknowledged his presence. Marcus found me afterward, sharing how he'd grown up without family heirlooms, without history to hold. "When I restore someone's grandmother's table," he said, "I'm giving them their story back." Sally would have loved him, would have seen what Brian could have been. May 20th through June 10th documented itself in security footage and spreadsheets. Brian arrived at 5:30 a.m. daily, 30 minutes before required. Inventory management, shipping labels, cleaning, whatever grunt work needed doing. He ate lunch alone on the loading dock, watching restoration work through windows he couldn't enter. Other employees initially treated him with the hostility reserved for management's questionable hires. But 3 weeks of silent work, no complaints, taking the worst shifts without protest, hostility faded to indifference. I reviewed footage weekly, looking for infractions. Found none. June 1st brought his first paycheck. $2,400 gross became $960 after garnishment. $1,440 toward the debt, leaving $198,560 remaining. He filed the receipt in my inbox without comment. Returned to stacking crates. The workspace developed its own rhythm. I passed through daily, inspecting without acknowledging. Brian cleaned my area after hours, not asked, not thanked. Small improvements appeared in the inventory system. More efficient, but nothing that demanded recognition. He spoke only when directly questioned, answered in minimal words. June 15th arrived with unusual heat. Ashley emerged from county jail into blazing sunshine. Designer clothes replaced by donation bin selections. No one waited. Her phone, dead for months, wouldn't summon an Uber until she found a charger at a coffee shop. She arrived at the gallery during lunch break, demanding to see Brian. Security had already been alerted. I'd tracked her release date. Brian emerged from the loading dock, divorce papers already in his shirt pocket. "We could rebuild together," Ashley said, trying for her old manipulation. "Start fresh, maybe Seattle. You destroyed everything." His voice carried no emotion, just fact. "I'm planning an influencer comeback, reformed bad girl, redemption arc. The audience loves..." He handed her the papers. "50,000 of the debt is yours. The forensic accountant traced which purchases you made with stolen cards." Ashley grabbed the papers, scanning for settlement terms. Her face changed when she read the debt allocation. 50,000? You agreed I owe 50,000? She looked up to see Brian walking away without a word. "You can't just leave," she screamed at his back. Security stepped forward as Brian disappeared into the warehouse, returning to his inventory sheets. July 20th, the Portland Art Museum glittered with the city's elite. The Craftsman Heritage Award dinner, 500 attendees in black tie, honoring lifetime achievement in restoration. I wore Sally's favorite tuxedo, the one she'd picked for our 30th anniversary. 25,000 prize dollars would go straight to the scholarship fund. My acceptance speech avoided personal details, focusing on destruction and rebuilding, the philosophy of restoration rather than revenge. The standing ovation felt hollow, success echoing in an empty chamber. Brian watched the live stream during his break. I saw the timestamp on the security footage later. His coworkers had no idea the man on screen was his father. He returned to loading pallets when his 15 minutes ended. National media coverage followed. Magazine features, documentary requests, gallery bookings through 2027. Every interviewer fished for the personal story behind the viral video. I deflected with practiced ease, discussing technique and tradition instead of family betrayal. "You've won everything you wanted," Walter observed later, sharing scotch in my penthouse as the gala replay aired on local news. "Have I?" Sally's photo sat in my jacket pocket, worn soft from handling. "Complete victory usually feels like this," he said. Empty. August 1st through 20th marked Brian's transformation through steady persistence. 3 months perfect attendance, $4,320 paid toward debt. He'd moved from his car to a studio apartment, one I owned, though managed through a property company. The divorce finalized without contest, Ashley disappearing to attempt her comeback elsewhere. Small recognitions accumulated. The warehouse manager mentioned improved efficiency. Other workers included him at lunch occasionally. He never mentioned his father's identity, never leveraged the connection. Just worked, paid, survived. Meanwhile, I packed the childhood home for my penthouse move. Brian's room remained untouched since January. Hockey trophies, band posters, the desk where he'd done homework. Salvation Army collected everything. The property manager received keys and rental applications. Brian's approval for his childhood home came through at market rate, $2,000 monthly, no family discount indicated on the lease. August 30th, 6 in the evening. The gallery quieted after closing, leaving me alone with the Morrison estate piece. The same French polishing technique Brian had scorned at 16. Sally's favorite radio station played softly, golden evening light catching the restoration's grain. Through the workshop glass, Brian cleaned the warehouse floor. He paused, watching my circular motions with the polish pad. Recognition flickered across his face, the same technique I'd tried teaching him before he'd decided it was worthless. He didn't approach, just observed. I continued the demonstration, aware of my audience, but offering no invitation. Later, an envelope appeared under my door. Payment receipt, debt update, efficiency suggestions for the warehouse. Balance, $192,240. Projected completion, April 2030. 4 years, 8 months remaining. August 31st, Walter visited my new penthouse with afternoon coffee. Boxes still waited unpacking, the view encompassing all Portland, including the gallery below. "Was it worth it, George?" He stood beside me at the window. "He destroyed 40 years of work. And you destroyed him. I gave him employment. That's not what I mean, and you know it." The balance sheet spread on my desk like a map of conquered territory. Financial recovery complete, professional reputation enhanced, international recognition achieved, family relationship terminated, Sally's memory honored through strangers, son reduced to employee number 47. I stood at the window, watching the sun set over the city where I'd built everything twice. Below, the gallery lights flickered on for evening events. In the warehouse, a lone figure pushed a broom across the loading dock. The debt ledger on my desk showed $192,240 remaining, 4 years, 8 months to go. The French polish on my hands caught the dying light as the last summer sunset of 2025 painted Portland gold, and I realized that complete victory tastes exactly like loss, only colder and infinitely more precise. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.